kept warning us all about this like Y2K bug, which is this like thing that was going to like bring all of civilization crumbling down. We were all petrified of just because the internal clocks of the computer like wouldn't be able to understand the fact that it's like zero. Yeah, three, two. Wait, he didn't say one. All right.
I always had an issue with that as a kid too.
Yeah, like wait, how do they know? Oh, they can count it in their heads. That's all right. So this is the Web3way. It's a double entendre because we get into three ways with people discussing the Web3 and what it is. You know, this is my brother Michael and I have been discussing. This is something that requires definition, and by George, we're here to be the ones to do it. So I'm Jethro. I'm an architect and designer living in London, and I studied industrial design for a lot of my life, and went to Rhode Island School of Design, and I have a penchant for design and details. Michael?
My name is Michael. I am indeed Jethro's brother. I am a sales and operations and branding specialist. That was what my most recent position was in, but I am a graduate of psychology from Boulder, University of Boulder, Colorado. And I did specialize mostly in finance and math psychology in different trading arenas, and actually applied a lot of UX user design. Had a brief stint as an internship as a as a UX designer for Zeco, and I also went to school right as the financial crash happened in 2008. So that's most of the reason why I got involved in any of that and all of that. And yeah, this is all based on basically everything that is leading up to this London trip that my brother and I and our family had in a road trip through Scotland and England. And we were
now you're like plunging the depths intellectually of what the future of capital and what the present and the future of capital is, I think, and like how quickly it can get like dystopian and utopian like within the same breath, right?
Correct. This is a very interesting topic because, most notably because, we are starting to blur the lines of, I mean, quite literally, what is money? And I know a lot of people actually think that in regards to crypto being fake money and real money being real money, it's probably not actually true. You know, the reality is that the fiat environment that we live in is very much not what you would call real money. And by that, I mean, not backed by any actual asset like it used to be, silver or gold. And, it's kind of getting into this blurred quagmire, I guess you would say, of the regulations, and it's weird. And this is right after we're recording this about a month and a half after the FTX blow up, where I personally think it's a very huge deal in the sense that, it's a very large, if the second largest crypto exchange after Binance to go under, and lots of questions being thrown around as to what it's going to play as in the future. I mean, specifically crypto, and to extension Web3 and everything.
Yeah, it is important to mention that, I think, because like that's such a big trust. Like so much of this is built on trust. And yeah, before we get too into like all the major players or all the like the notorious people who've gone down. I don't want to say that too soon, but so
yeah, I mean, yes.
Yeah. So there's this term Web3, right, which precludes the notion that there's a Web 1 and a 2, right? So I think it bears mentioning that there's no clear line between Web 1, 2, and 3 just at the outset. It's like the waves of feminism, which a lot of people are like have heard third wave feminism as like the new, first wave feminism was suffragettes and the voting rights. and second wave feminism was like 60s bra burning, and the third wave was kind of equal pay, and then Me Too movement. Like there's a kind of there's an analogous sort of not very clear, crispy lines between what Web 1.0, Web 2.0, and what Web 3.0 is. Like, would you kind of agree to that?
Yeah, I mean, of course. I feel like everything that we at least experience as a society is going to be pretty much, not crystallized until it's in retrospect, and that's basically what's happening as we speak now, but at lightning speed. I mean, everything that's
Mm-hmm.
going on right now with these definitions, Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, is it's just a continuation of building upon what the internet is. And yeah, and we are here to make mistakes about what it is and learn from
Yeah.
them, and actually bring on people that are using it to their advantage, and seeing how it is that they are applying these different kinds of technologies, and more specifically, we're going to see what it is that Web3 can be, or what it is, what it can be, what it could be used for. And yeah, continuing on this human journey, Homo sapien sapien journey.
Yeah, so I think that's a yeah. I think yeah. We're the ignorant ones here. We're here to learn from the people who we invite on. Also, what I as a millennial, I'm an early stage millennial, and I think a lot of the millennial thing has to do with the fact that you grew up on the internet. So I really much grew up like just learning about the like I it was like 12 or 13, or actually our uncle had Prodigy, which was like the precursor to AOL, and so like I was aware of the internet because of him for a while, and like so like I learned to type quickly because I was like flirting with my girlfriend on like my old Macintosh, like the grape iMac thing.
G5.
Thank you, the
The
G5. That's right.
G5. I still use that thing with the puck
Oh
mouse.
man, that puck mouse was so ergonomically garbage. I don't know how they shipped that. I don't know how anybody got convinced.
Oh
Anyway,
man.
but like so yeah, here's to me what the Web 1.0 was, right? It was this just cringe just it was like well experts call it was like the read only internet, right? It was basically a digital catalog with that you can like press buttons, and the most richness you can get really was just like here's a phone number, it was a counter. Sometimes they'd have a counter at the bottom. It was like this many people came to the site. Like, okay, dope,
It's true.
thanks.
And let's not forget about slowly downloaded porn stills. That's also a large thing that was, and you're like, oh man, that's a nipple.
Oh man, oh man. It's like watching a grainy like 3 a.m. porn on like channel 4 or whatever. Like, oh
3 a.m.
man.
porn. I was looking at 8 a.m. porn, man, like right on the wake up.
Just a little bit of coffee, a little scrambled porn, scrambled eggs and scrambled porn. Hot takes.
Yes, that was. Continue with your description
No,
of
no, no. I mean,
fake.
so like, so this was my, this was my web, and to me, like, I learned how to build sites on it. This like Angel Fire, GeoCities was like a big Web 1.0. Along with the like the piles of free AOL discs that I'd get at like my Specs music stores, just like everywhere. They were like you like tripping on these piles of free AOL CD-ROMs. So like, what's you like? Are you do is what's your Web 1.0 experience?
Well, just so that everyone here that's listening understands that I am 7 whole years younger than my brother.
Mhm.
I was born in 1990, so I guess you would call me exactly the mid millennial. And yes, that is about right. When I was getting onto online, right on the preparation for this show, my brother threw me back hard into Ask Jeeves, because Ask Jeeves was actually the first search engine that I was using, and this was like fourth and fifth grade of elementary school. So we're talking about 2000, 2009. So just to give you an idea, and from that point, that was my Web 1.0 experience. AOL was still very much a thing, and what everyone was using for email. Google was right around the corner, and definitely, starting to ramp up its dominance and its algorithms, which are obviously much better than everything else that came along before that. And the entirety of, I for the most part don't remember life before the internet up until 5 years. That's a lie. Everything up until 5, 6 years old, I remember that there was some talk of the internet, and then everything beyond that, it was like, okay, I remember being on the internet, understanding that it was mostly between at least the years 5 and 10 of my age. I was like, okay, this is mostly something that nerds do, and eventually just like
Hmm.
skyrocketed, obviously from there because, yeah, I think it was definitely the advent of Google. Google really is the thing that really came along. Also, it wasn't just Google. I mean, it was Ask Jeeves, and there is, I want to say like Alta Vista. I remember Alta Vista.
Yeah, Alta Vista was definitely one of the big players. I mean, there are all these like kind of mom and pop grassroots, just like search engines, right? That's kind
Right.
of that's what web a lot of web and like okay, if we were like getting super specific, which we won't because we're not smart enough to do so. Web 1.0 is a series of protocols, right? Like HTML before HTML5, TCP/IP, which is like how we like start like mail clients, right? These
Right,
types of
right, right,
things.
right.
And I think to like a not ignorable degree, these degrees in the web are really like thresholded by protocols, right? By like
Right, right.
and probably the devices that we use to log on to them, right? So my
Yeah,
hot
Web
take for go ahead.
no, no, I was gonna say, yeah, Web 1.0 was basically a library. That's what it was. Like Web
Mm-hmm.
1.0 was obviously there was, information, there's research. Most of it was, I think probably most of it was either research or forums of text. Chat rooms and all that was,
Yep.
definitely
Mm-hmm.
still mid, the creation, mid initial creation of the internet. But for the most part, I mean, it was definitely used for looking up research,
Mm-hmm.
sending some text messaging, not in the same way that we know as phone, and I think that's about it. Like, you still had to do www in the search in the URLs. Like that. I remember the years where you had to actually put www because it wasn't just like an impost
Yeah.
pasted Google algorithm
Yeah.
that you just put in whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned like searching like for research. Like I remember like having to go off of the internet and go onto the Encarta Encyclopedia CD-ROM to get to like actually write a paper on E. coli.
To give an idea to the viewers, if anyone is younger than we are, because I'm sure they're whatever the demographics are going to be, our teachers did not, at least up until I want to say my freshman year of high school, the people were like, I don't want no information from the internet.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I was just like, this is insane. Like, I was like, how is it that you're going to say that an encyclopedia written from the 70s is going to have whatever
up
up
to
to
the
date
date information.
information?
Yeah,
And you're just like, this doesn't make sense. Granted, if you're going to like Wikipedia or whatever, that's probably still
yeah,
like the, initial stages of, because that's all self-edited or, whatever. But now it has probably a little bit more regulation, more filtering out of what good information, what's bad information. But yeah, I mean, Google Scholar now is probably the standard, I guess, for most
yeah. I
anything
mean,
that's
and that's good to like ease us into the Web 2.0. Like to talk next about Web 2.0, but like my hot take on like what ended Web 1.0 was I remember I had like a computer sciences teacher in high school at my design high school in Miami that like kept warning us all about this like the Y2K bug, which is this like thing that was gonna like bring all of civilization crumbling down. And like we were all petrified of what like
I
just
remember
because
that.
the
I was
internal
11.
clocks of the computer like wouldn't be able to understand the fact that it's like zero like all right like I mean I get it from actually no in hindsight I don't understand what the panic could have been about but I think that's all hindsight but
It was okay. I'll tell you what it was because I actually have some brief knowledge of this. It's because, and this is complete. I'm just throwing a wet rag here from what I'm saying here, but I remember that it was because the entries to whatever data servers or whatever weren't plugged in terms of year as
Right.
1972 or whatever. It was actually just
Yeah.
72 or whatever date it started. And so the fact that that was looked over as like, oh no, like what happens when it's all zeros,
Yeah.
and then it's,
Exactly. Yeah.
and then, and then Terminator starts to happen.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So again, I think yeah. Let's get into what Web 2 is. And when I was kind of jotting notes down for this, I was like, it's kind of hard to define Web 2.0 because it's our very existence. It's like asking a fish to define the water that it lives
I
in.
know.
Like it's the internet of like it's an expanded internet into devices, Google
And,
Nest, and
and it's hard, admittedly, to think of anything more than we have now because we're like, wow, like what more could we ever want? The same way people were like, bro, the 90s, like we're at the pinnacle of our existence, as the Matrix said.
Yeah. Like or more conversely, right? The fact that like in the mid-century, everyone thought the revolution would be in transport instead of what it was, which is communication. And so I think maybe there's some analog to that with Web 3.0, where we all a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago thought the next internet would be way more immersive and more like whatever, more virtual reality. When in fact, the necessary developments might be more related to security, which is why Web3 is maybe a necessary step. But before we get too into Web3, to define a little bit web, since this the whole thing is about defining Web3, and then obviously like getting into extrapolating what Web3 is. Web 2.0, I'm just kind of reading from notes from Tim O'Reilly, who's this like technologist. He coins like big data, right? Web 2 is about big data, the collection of big data. It's participative, it's social. E-commerce was only possible, like e-commerce was kind of a thing that made Web 2.0 hatch out of Web 1.0. Yeah, Tim O'Reilly popularized the term open source and Web 2.0. So he's kind of like
I did not know
a
that.
guru. Yeah. Yeah, and so content generation and heavy distribution and centralized monetization through trusted parties like YouTube, PayPal, etc. I mean, Elon Musk invented PayPal during Web 1.0, I guess, technically, but it definitely kind of got its stride, I think, in Web 2.0 when people were starting to buy things on the web. So
Oh, that's right. He was PayPal. I totally forget that Elon did PayPal.
yeah.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, actually, I've got a. Oh, yeah. Anyway, I was gonna.
That's right. And PayPal started in 2005.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, hold on. I've got to show this one just because it's.
I know. I know.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's a classic.
I've seen. Yeah, if you ever, there was some commenting. It's like, well, I mean, yeah, it's the same. It was like him. It was Elon and LeBron both on a comment thread, and it was like, seems like being rich buys you hair.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. So again, really, like if this is Web 1.0, just to use National Geographic as a test case, right? Web 1.0 went from just like this catalog version with like download Microsoft Internet Explorer, still trying to push itself, and then now in Web 2.0, it's way more. I'll use the term rabbit hole, which is not a good term, but it's like it can take you to so many other places, right? It subscribes you to e-newsletters. It takes you to like the Disney streaming service of National Geographic. It takes you to buy Chris Hemsworth's socks on his own site. It's way more involved. The advertising revenue just explodes, right? And yeah, it's
Right. The participation is more. There is now user inputted content, for
yes,
lack of a better word. I mean, that's weird because it's again, it's fish in the water right now. But
hmm
yeah, you have, again, instead of a library now, you kind of have a marketplace.
yeah,
Like that's what's going on now. You can have, people put up their info, they put up their content. Businesses have payment processors of all types. You have everything that is essentially, again, a central hub of, not just info, but being able to acquire assets digitally, but not necessarily actually, again, owning your assets digitally, as we will continue to go
Yeah.
into that rabbit hole. But we are able to at least acquire tangible assets via people who, for example, own their business, or again, stream videos and media of that sort.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it's again very esoteric, I guess, because we're starting to self-reflect on what the internet is, which is kind of tough, but
Exactly.
that's what we're here to do.
Yeah, and yeah, I think the self-reflection is key. Also, I think a part of the ascension of Web 2.0 into the 3.0 space is you can't ignore this. Like, okay, so Call of Duty massive multiplayer gaming is like pulls Web 2.0 into Web 3.0, right? It like just the fact that you could like in like Xbox 3, whichever one it was, 2 point, I
No,
forget
Xbox,
which.
Xbox One. I remember.
You
I
could
mean, this
do
might.
you could do it with
Well,
Xbox One, like you because you
no,
plugged it into the back with like a LAN cable, right?
sure, but that's not what I was going to get to. Was I mean, for I mean, if we're talking about Web 2.0 and its utility, I guess in the sense of the word, it's I mean, dude, people were playing Counter Strike on computers before what I mostly got into. I mean, I was playing. That's not true. I was playing Counter Strike on computers too, and like, God, what is it called? What was Scorpico called? LAN stores, like LAN stores, like where you
Yeah,
go.
local access network. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where basically, you I guess got to see. I mean, those are a little bit more closed loop, so that's different because
Right.
you had to go to the actual party to be there. Same thing, I guess, with Xbox, but I think personally, Counter Strike One, and I mean, dude, Halo Two. Halo
Hmm.
Two
Right.
was what a lot of people started
Exactly.
to do. Started to play with and everyone was able to like come into like from everywhere all around the globe and play Halo with each other. That was insane. That was
Hmm.
crazy. And
Yeah.
people were, that was my first experience. I know it's not the first one technically, but
Yeah, and it really revolutionized the ability for people to yell insults at strangers from millions of miles away.
yeah, yeah. And
Precursor to
declass
Twitter,
and
might I
de
say?
and all, I mean, a lot of there's a lot of declassifications of people fornicating with the enemy's mother. Like, it was really nuts.
True.
It
Yeah.
was like, oh wow, I didn't know my mom had so many
Oh yeah.
suitors.
It was so disappointing to find out. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really nuts.
Yeah. So if so, understand. Okay. Yeah. So I think this brings us into something that we were kind of just trying to describe to our dad on a trip recently of like how gaming really became the cocoon, the chrysalis for Web 3.0 in this kind of like development of an alternative trust, if I can kind of
Yeah,
synthesize it,
yeah,
right? Like if we're willing to pay actual money to like gear out our like our video game car, video game gun, then there's a market for alternative currency, right? Alternative, yeah, cryptocurrency, which means hidden, right?
correct.
Cryptos, hidden currency. You know.
The this is a tough chicken or the egg question, because I will say, for as of right now, I feel like the most obvious applicable, and this is my opinion, this is my hot take, but I feel like the most obvious and applicable large step forward in Web3 is going to be carried through gaming, because of the fact that, I mean, you have just, again, like, it all comes down to digital assets, right? Like, we're talking about
Mhm.
opening up a whole set of value, which, and you could argue that it's defined by whatever, but there's a lot of talk about, Steam, and a lot of people who, pay absurd amounts of money for example, having a character look cool in a battle or a first person shooter game or something like that. We're talking about thousands of dollars. We're talking
Mhm.
about, it's an industry in and of itself. I think it just breached $1 billion or something, this past week or 2 weeks ago, and that's
Mhm.
one thing. But I feel like the and this is tough because, again, like, I feel like that's probably the next step ahead of us. But I feel like what really brought it into the mainstream for Web 3 was probably right after the financial crisis when Bitcoin emerged as like, okay, whoever it was, Satoshi, or, whoever the Banksy equivalent of whoever decided to do this anonymously or make the system, was like, screw the bank, screw all this. This is too much. We need a little bit more transparency. We need, a digital asset that could be tracked everywhere and anywhere. And that is when it became mainstream because, I feel like in my, again, my own personal opinion, my own hot take,
Mm-hmm.
people were making money, like people were,
Yeah.
all of a sudden you got Bitcoin and you have like, oh, what does that even mean? It's not worth real money. What's that? Well, all of a sudden, you got crypto millionaires, and now you have like a whole offshoot of all these different kinds of crypto, and so like the money thing came into question, and that's really where that's really where I feel like people started to like pay more attention to this because because again, whenever there's money involved, there's not just people that are taking note, but there's also governments that are taking notes, and there's a lot of regulations that are like starting to question, who and protect what, and who it's and how it's going to be incorporated, and and let's be real, the world and the governments don't like it when you fuck with their money.
Right.
That's just
Exactly.
that's just what it comes down to. So they definitely, I feel like, have a large part in the last, wow, it's been 14 years now, right? Since it
Mm-hmm.
came out. Yeah. So we're talking about, we're still on the up curve, and we're still very much in the new phase of all of this. But again, circling back to the main point, um, yeah, gaming, I think, is probably that use case. And to a further extent, I feel like the reason why it's gaming is because gaming is it's its own world. Realistically, you have worlds in these digital spaces that uh and I was telling this to my brother in the road trip through the UK. It was like, if you can almost, it's not too much of a stretch to think about all these different worlds as their own countries. Like if you have, and that's where the crypto thing comes in. They're like, oh, what's crypto applicable for? It's no mass adoption and this and that. Well, yeah, sure, crypto starts to become a little bit more solid or firm in idea when you start to apply it into, for example, spaces. Like if you can't trade dollars in digital space, and I mean you can, but the settlement system is going to work well. Like it's not going to
Yeah.
be tied to your bank account. It's all going to be, for the most part, you want instant settlement in the game, this and that. And for the most part, also, you can argue that Steam does that, but you can't sell your Steam product or whatever gaming product, or your skin or whatever, to another player. Like you have to
Right.
sell it back to their own marketplace, which is like, again, a whole issue that comes into centralization and decentralization. And that's what I guess a lot of people advocate for in terms of decentralization, is like, and marketplaces in general, is like, I want to sell this, it has X value, and what are you guys willing to pay for it? And it was, and I don't want to have it sold back to Steam, or, for example, and the other issue that comes into play here is, you have content that you buy off Amazon or off whatever, and again, it's not bought. You're just buying the rental agreement every month to be able to watch it, and that money goes essentially bye bye whenever the contracts or whatever terms of service Amazon may have with whatever third party production studio, and all of a sudden it's like, all right, term gone, and now your content's gone too. And that happens
Right.
with skins, that happens with games too, that happens in Steam. Like, sometimes these platforms are go under or just disappear, and all that money that you invested in your skin or your gun or whatever now is gone, and people gripe and complain about it all the time, and in the same breath are like, oh, NFTs are a scam, when in reality NFTs actually are a perfect
All right,
use case.
hold on. Let's slow down. Let's not rabbit hole because we're saying a lot of things that
That's
we
true.
haven't even like given the glossary for the for really. I mean, right now, I think in a really salient way, the only thing that Web3 really is a collection of terms that a whole lot of people don't know what the hell they are, right? So
Correct.
I
Correct.
think maybe like starting down this yellow brick road is starting to like identify these things, like get like our sack together, our knapsack for going on this thing, and like and like knowing exactly what we're putting in our knapsack and understanding what these are. So
Right.
so if there's a current if there's like a broad current understanding, like I think Web3 is currently like a set of ideas more than it is a platform, right? It's this issue like you alluded to of decentralization, a paradigm of users are controlling the system, which I think is very noble and very grassroots. It's never it's never something that people don't like to hear, right? And
Right.
it's a lot of this is really based on trust, right? You trust the people in the gaming console to kind of provide you this exchange. You trust, certain people trust Bank of America to provide them the interest rate for whatever for their mortgage. Like these are institutions of trust, and perhaps Web 3.0 offers a decentralized trust system where one thing that I was saying that I was trying to like make an analogy towards is like is this like an attempt at reigniting the like the barter system in like medieval times, right? Like just go down to your local intranet rather, like your like if my community in London had a just an intranet, right, just for Arlington, like Arlington Park, that is just like people trading stuff, people giving leftover jam, because like you can't give leftover jam on a large internet because it's going to go bad by the time so like
Correct.
is it a localized version of what the larger internet can be?
Yeah, that's
Is that the
actually a
paradigm?
no. I mean, yeah, I would say that's a good paradigm. I feel like the reason why it's difficult, again, this is difficult to again, it's all so esoteric because we're not there yet, really. I mean, that's the truth of the matter. It's one of these things where,
Aren't we?
and I mean, we're not. I mean, realistically, we will be there once everyone who is using Web3 or blockchain doesn't know that they're using Web3 or blockchain. Like, really, that's what it is. And the reason I feel like we're not there yet is because there isn't really. I mean, it's one of these things where, and like, and this is another this we got to discern between Web3
Mm-hmm.
again is like the umbrella. Web3 is like the umbrella term for everything that's included in Web3. I
Yeah.
feel like you could probably say accurately ish that Web3 is, or excuse me, blockchain is under Web3 because it's all built on the concept of what the blockchain
Yeah.
is,
Okay,
and
then let's
blockchain.
get into it. Give us like, because I think you're right. Blockchain is the base, right? So what is in the in the simplest possible way? What is blockchain?
So the blockchain is essentially, if you can imagine, it's the internet, but with if you were to imagine, I guess you would say a carbon molecule and the set of carbon molecules set up in a diamond formation, which is meaning a grid, and that's what is a grid with all four of its carbon atoms attached to all the other carbon atoms around it. You have essentially a system that can actually verify transactions and asset changes. So what you essentially do with blockchain, or what it is it's an ecosystem in the sense that you're able to track anything in the digital space, who owns it, and how much of it went somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why stuff like cryptocurrencies and NFTs come into play. Like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's those two things exist in the blockchain in the sense that cryptocurrency is it's just it's what it is. It's a currency, and there's a lot of definition between like
Wait, what
is it
is
an asset.
currency? What did you say?
Cryptocurrency is called a
Is a
currency
currency,
because
right?
it's is what it is basically like anything else. Like currency in the current form in dollars
Right.
is essentially just a digital number, a digital ledger that says Jethro has $100, and if he sends it to Michael,
Right.
now Michael has $100. But
Right.
where's the hundred
It's
dollars?
effectively how I interact with my credit card, which I look at. I open a browser to like look at what it is that I've spent once a year. Like I'm super bad
Right.
at that. Like so
Um, but
I just
the
trust. I trust that my employer is paying me, and that it's like I'm paying the people. So it's
right,
yeah.
exactly. So everyone understands that because everyone uses it in their everyday life. I feel like the jump into and the issue with the esotericness of Web3 is that again, the issue with it is that no one can imagine it because there's no full adaptation of it. I
Right.
feel like it. It's everyone's like, well, once Bitcoin is now available everywhere, like that is when everyone starts to understand, like, okay, now it's an actual currency. Granted, the mechanics and the way that it's layered, or the way it's programmed, it's a little different. So there's a lot of issues when it comes to, for example, Bitcoin, solving a lot of issues that, for example, Ethereum can now do with, not just layer two scaling, but also, we're getting into like the weeds here that I don't want to do that yet. But
Yeah. So here, let's summarize blockchain because I think you did a pretty good job. So if I might, blockchain is a shared ledger, which offers transparency. Right. It's a distributed virtual computing system. It
right,
is incentivized, and actually, I'm stealing this from technologist Benedict Evans. He says that it's incentivized and deterministic, and it is trustless. He makes this really good analogy where perhaps Web 2.0 is like driving on a highway where you trust that the guy next to you is going to stay within the lanes. Web 3.0 offers railroad rails where it's on the rails and it's going, and you don't need to like depend on the honor of your transactor or transactee to stay in their lane because it's on rails. You're just offering
right.
rails to the system, and it's
Yeah,
depend
that's a
and yeah, and this is dependent on protocols, right? Which is, I guess, the main thing. It's we're putting our trust in the code as opposed to each other, and is that
yeah, that's exactly right. I feel like it's again very esoteric, but it's like the power of its security comes from the fact that it's transparent. I feel like everyone can agree that if something is transparent, it's going to be more trustworthy. But there's also the question of anonymous. It's is it anonymous? Yes, it's anonymous in the sense that no one can look at the information that identifies you. And in this example, we're talking about, we're going to get into like, crypto wallets and how that works, because
mm-hmm,
if you were to send someone money or crypto, they have to store it in a wallet, and that wallet address doesn't say John Smith, 32 years old, et cetera, et cetera. It'll say, it'll just have a code, and that
mm-hmm,
code will be your wallet address, and that wallet address is, essentially your teepee in. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. Your teepee in the in the entirety that is the addresses of blockchain. And
mm-hmm.
so to basically tie it off, it's basically like the reason why it's verified, the reason why it's transparent, the reason why it's safe in in theory is because every time you make this transaction, you, again, drawing back to this four carbon gridlock diamond pattern that is the blockchain, you have thousands of computers that are verifying these transactions. You
Mm-hmm.
have thousands of computers that are double checking to make sure that there's no bad actors, or there isn't anything fishy going on, or tracing back wherever this transaction came from its origin. And you yourself can see whether this person, or not, where this wallet, or whether this asset, or whether this cryptocurrency is coming from this person, where it's been, all again in anonymous terms, because again, just serialized, encrypted, addresses. But that is essentially what the blockchain is going to be used for, or what it is used for even today. It's a way for transparency to be king, and for everything to be verified, because let's face it, humans suck, and there's always going to be bad actors in some way, shape, or form, especially when it comes to money,
Right,
especially when it comes to information. So
right. Yeah, so I think that's great. Like I think this, yeah, we're developing this blockchain that I think a lot of people maybe don't already understand, that you could build so much of what exists on Web 2.0 on blockchain. And like I think maybe we'll have to there's other terms like in the glossarification of what we're trying to do here. There's things like DeFi, right? Decentralized finance. We kind of covered that already. There's cryptocurrency, which is like secret money in its very kind of literal sense. NFTs, which I think are like the current bad boy of what the use case of blockchain is, which is really just a productized version of, not version, it's a product, it's a developed product of blockchain and Web3, right? It's a use case,
right.
really. It's something that we're all still trying on. We're seeing if it fits. And yeah, and right now, like Michael, who do you think the hegemons right now of Web, other than like the venture capitalists who are like fueling this? Like, is it like obviously Bitcoin, Ethereum, FTX? I guess not
There-
anymore. And
so everyone, okay, so there's one thing that everyone should know or understand when it comes to, so Bitcoin was the first cryptocurrency, and everything spurred off from there. Its functionality though is kind of
blah.
tough and rigid
Yeah.
in the sense that it's very safe. It is very safe in that regard. Like it's something that was built to be paramount, safe, and transparent. But its utility is starting to fall behind, and it's starting to fall behind specifically Ethereum. And the reason why is because I mean, everyone can start talking about transaction speed. That was like the first thing that everyone was like, oh, like I don't want to wait 30 minutes or an
Right.
hour or whatever to get my Bitcoin from one person to another. That's going to be tough. But the thing is that everything beyond, or most coins beyond Ethereum, are actually built on the Ethereum blockchain. So Ethereum
Mm.
has its own blockchain, Bitcoin has its own blockchain, but a lot of the derivative coins that are made in cryptocurrency are built on the Ethereum blockchain and on Ethereum technology. So you got to understand that that environment is kind of interesting because that's where you have like swaps come into play, and why coins are being swapped between Ethereum and other different coins, and that in and of itself is its own industry, on I guess you could say its own marketplace.
Hmm.
But the whole concept here is also that Ethereum also has what is now starting to catch more traction is as smart contracts, and smart contracts are
Right.
essentially just coded contracts that are automatically set in motion when you have these if and then statements set up, and if they're
Right.
completed, then you can go on along about your life or about that business transaction or what have you.
Yeah, and
That's
I love like the idea of smart contracts is amazing. As an architect, as an architect who's survived two recessions and done a lot of freelancing, if smart contracts offers the promise of I don't need to expect my prospective freelance employer to pay me because I can see it. I can see when he's doing it. I can see I can see it. Like there's a portal that allows me to view it, like he can view my services rendered and I can view his either ability to pay me or actually having paid me, which I
correct.
love the smart contract.
Yeah, the smart contract is basically so the smart, and to a further extent, you'll probably a lot of our viewers or a lot of people have heard that what a DAO is, and a DAO is an acronym that stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization.
Hmm.
And again, pretty esoteric in the sense of like maybe companies and product services building or what have you. But I feel like the best analogy was also on the trip in the road trip through the UK with my brother was, imagine if a DAO
Oh, I
was
love this. Yeah.
yeah, a DAO was, let's say your neighborhood, and everyone in a specific neighborhood or gated community, if you're that bougie, has entrance to this DAO, which is essentially just, it could be a honeypot, it could be a forum, it could be a mix of anything you can think of in terms of community, where you, for example, can all agree that you have a pothole problem. And that's an issue because the government doesn't want to allocate your budget to this pothole, so that becomes bureaucratic nightmare. And instead what you have is a smart contract that agrees upon, like, all right, well, this is the pitch in, you can pitch in for $5, $10, what
Yeah.
have you. It's a goal, and it gets automatically carried out whenever it is that you reach whatever
Yeah.
goals, if and thens. And eventually, whoever it is that wants to come into that DAO, and by the way, this is future, so like this is all still very hypothetical. You'll probably have a private company that wants to pick up these DAOs on the same blockchain to look at these different contracts and be like, oh, we'll take on that. And
Yeah,
boom.
and it doesn't really even really need to be that hypothetical. I feel like you can script something in Python where like you have a short list or a long list of contractors in your area, in the area of the pothole, that the smart contract automatically sends these requests for quotes, RFQs, to those contractors, and it's like, hey, look, we're offering, this is like a Kickstarter, right? Like once it reaches a certain goal, you get paid immediately. Maybe it's in crypto, maybe it's in US dollars, maybe it's in Facebook Libra, whatever the hell. You get paid this exact amount. Maybe it's even divided up by like if you with incentive structures, right? If you I don't know, like the kind of the possibilities are endless, but you could basically you put the power back into the people who suffer to be able to fix the problems in this kind of civic framing that you're talking
Right.
about.
Exactly. And you have to, and again, I think it's also one of these things that you have to, as time goes along, you'll understand that these contracts are probably, will self-develop. But like, if for example, you have a goal, you reach it as a community and it doesn't reach, a specific number that any contractor will take, then, it'll automatically go back on bid in auction or whatever. And the honeypot continues like, well, after a month, no one's picked up this contract. The pothole still exists. So let's open this up for another
Exactly.
bit of money.
Yep. Yep.
And, eventually they'll get to a certain point where you can put it back to market. You'll probably have these contractors waiting for it to actually reach a certain amount of time. And,
Yep.
it's all pretty odd. And when you start to think about it like that, it really starts to open your imagination in the sense that the utility for it is actually pretty awesome.
Yeah.
You remove a lot of the human arbitrage, in the sense that like you probably need less people to manage it. It's more automatic.
Right.
It frees up a lot of money in terms of administration purposes. Probably a lot of people, probably a lot of accountants that are probably not
Yeah.
happy to hear this kind of stuff because, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, like it sucks to say because I'm not a
No, I mean
professional
it's a
accountant,
new
but
it's a new reality, and I think the train metaphor is a good one, right? It's like you're not taking humans out of the equation. Humans still need to do maintenance on it and like drive the train, but like you no longer have the possibility of like texting and driving accidents, right? Well, you
right.
do have it because the Web 2 isn't gone. So before we get too into the exciting world of Web 3 and defining it, I think we need to get into some provocations, right? I mean, we're kind of in it now, right? Like I think this whole being able to fix your own pothole is like a thrilling provocation. But I think an interesting thing is like Jack Dorsey from Twitter, who obviously has like a stake in Web 2.0, right? In a centralized, well, maybe not anymore. Well, I think he's still on the board, right, of Twitter, even though Elon
I
bought
don't
it.
know. I don't know. I mean, man, for board presence, I have no idea because I feel like everyone can be anywhere, anytime.
Yeah.
But I don't. I mean, he's definitely not on Square anymore, is he? Is he on
Um,
Square still? No.
Good
Yeah, he's
question.
not on
I don't know.
Square.
But either way, so Jack Dorsey says he in this like in the excitement of Web 3, he says that you don't own Web 3, as in like the public. That's a misnomer, right? You don't actually own Web 3. The
No,
VCs, the venture capitalists, and their LPs do. LP? Could you hit me with what that is?
limited partners.
Partnerships, yeah, and their
Yeah, I
partners.
think it's limited partners.
They're the ones who do. It will never escape their incentives. It's ultimately a centralized entity with a different label. Know what you're getting into. So clearly a hot take from Jack Dorsey, just being like, fuck you, Web 3.
Yeah, I mean, also, I feel like that's probably a good. I mean, I can't say that it's an uninformed take from someone who started a financial tech company. So he probably has a lot more insight into it. But it, I feel like calling calling the over unders right now is kind of tough. Like we really again don't know. We really don't know where it's going to lead us. And again, I guess this is the whole point of this podcast is to actually get people on here that are working in these specific or whatever industry, and applying
Yeah.
Web3. And I'm currently trying to doing my research right now on a very specific company and how they're using it. But yeah, that's the again, the possibilities are endless. Are there pros? Massively. Are there cons? Probably. Like that's the
Yeah.
thing is like the cons are always going to be something that needs to be worked out. But I feel like the essence of where we are now, and I feel like the reason why we wanted to do this whole podcast talk is, and at least in my opinion, is there's so much hate. There's really so much hate for all this new technology that it's not new technology. People love new technology, but they
Hmm.
don't like disruptive technology. That is for certain. Like people don't like getting their feathers ruffled, and they don't like,
Hmm.
especially when it comes to money, which again, there's a lot of that going into with Web3.
Yeah.
But saying like human progress is never ever gone anywhere by someone saying X. There's like there's this idea floating around, and we think it's pretty cool, and everyone else saying, "Nah, that's gonna suck," and they're like,
Hmm.
"Ah, whatever. Yeah, you're right. Let's just throw up our papers in the air, and there's not gonna be
Yeah.
anything." It's like humans don't progress like that. Like that's not how it works out.
Yeah. Yeah, and also it's a lot of it is like you said, it's people don't like to have their money messed with. And kind of here, how's the I think how can I put it most saliently is like obviously technology is built on kind of you stand on the shoulder of giants. I think Newton said it. We stand on the shoulder of giants, and we're able to build on what has come before us. And but even still, like when you're standing, when someone is standing on those shoulders, you don't want the guy underneath you whose shoulders you're standing on to be cut out from under you, right? And so I think there's some of that sentiment of like, all right, well, hold on, because there's we're all still under here, and I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. That's yeah, it's tough. I feel like it's one of these things where it's just going to get resistance. I mean, the internet was called a scam on a bunch of different articles, a bunch of different newspapers. They're like, oh, when are these kids going to learn, kind of deal.
Yeah.
It's one of these things where, I mean, who knows? We may be at the precipice of another crazy breakthrough. I think we are. Like, I think considering how quick. I mean, again, UK road trip. Think about the fact that a 3GS iPhone was the new hot shit in 2008.
Oh yeah,
What did the
Jesus
3GS
Christ.
phone do? Fuck all. Like, it didn't do anything. Like, it was just like, oh, you got an internet browser, and sweet.
Yeah.
Now everything is an app. Everything, everything,
Do you
everything is an
remember
app.
when 5G used to give us cancer? Those were
I
the
think it still
days.
does.
I mean, I put my router right in between my legs, and but it's the cheapest vasectomy you can possibly get.
And again, this is another thing that I feel like it's something that it's like a broken record, but it sounds like a broken record because I keep reiterating. But it's another reference to this road trip was like, I forgot what podcast I was listening to it, but there's this guy who was mentioning, it's like, dude, this exact topic that I was just mentioning. It's like it's only been 10 years since the internet became actually cool. Like
Yeah.
to the point where everyone's on their phones, everyone has an app, everyone has the. I remember when people were like, "What's the point of an app if you have websites?" And it's like
Right.
because it's all tailored for that specific purpose.
Yeah, I
It's
mean, not
all
only
specific spaces.
now it's not only is it cool, it's ubiquitous and completely necessary. Like, what's more necessary than necessary? It's like I think especially with the pandemic, I think I realized. I mean, a lot of us became kind of digital nomads after that, and like I realized that you can build like an Airbnb that really is just like coffee maker slash Wi-Fi. Like that's all that I need. If you just give me Wi-Fi and and an espresso, like I'll go anywhere. You know. Hold on. I think You're on mute. You muted yourself. There we go. All right.
Yeah, I think it's crazy to look back, and you don't have to look back far. And like you remember these questions that you never thought twice about in the last ever because it's just been smooth sailing since then. And again, like yeah, the I think the biggest I think the biggest clue is the app thing. I feel like the app thing is a microcosm of like where we're going, where the internet really is, and like Web3 by extension is really starting to get into these very small customized spaces. And that's what I guess the app world was. Like the app world
Mm-hmm.
where people started getting apps loaded on their phone was just this need that people didn't realize, like I did. Like, why are you doing apps? Websites work well, but again, it's all just like a whole nother outside the box thinking where you have a software and you are a business and you want to be able to cater to a specific customer or demographic or service on your iPhone where everything is now transferring over to, that's
Mm-hmm.
that I think is, a good uh I forgot the word of it, whatever, a matrix to, build upon, because that's, I think, what's going to happen now. And I think that's what Web3 is. It's going to become a identity encryption. You yourself have a presence in, dare I say, the metaverse, or whatever you want to call it,
Right.
where you have quite literally a presence in the greater scheme of what the internet is. You have your own wallet, you'll have your own money that's applicable to anything there. They'll have businesses, you'll have NFT coupons that are catered to you specifically as an individual, because you shop at this company so much that they're like, you know what, we're going to give you specifically 15% off, as opposed to John Schmo over here who has half the revenue that we come from, or that, spends X amount.
Hmm.
Stuff
Yeah.
like that. Like, people don't even think about it. It's like, yeah, it's all in another way that I think that Web3 and people don't realize is I personally think the next version, or the next step in company loyalty, is going to be companies actually serving their customers, where people are going to be fighting to give good service, because people are going to understand, or companies are going to understand that you're not going to have stable income unless you're trusted. You're not going to have
Hmm.
good service, or you're not going to provide good service unless people want to buy stuff from you. And if that's the case, like, I think that's where, that's a perfect use case for NFTs. You're talking about quite literally customized purchasing experiences for people and their loyalty. Like,
Okay,
how
so
much
then
better does it
at
get?
the risk of getting too philosophical, like 5 minutes or 10 minutes before our guest comes in, is Web3, in your opinion, simply the next best tool in techno libertarianism?
I think it's the best candidate. I mean,
Right,
it
like what you just described of like services can actually serve their customers in a way that they needed to be served. Like that sounds very, you know, it's
yeah,
like the libertarian promise. Like I do like it's like the Ron Swanson right,
it's
ethos.
again, tying back to the app example. The app example is serving the centralized authority that is providing that service. It's I mean, to some extent, like it also serves the customer, obviously, because it's a two-way street. But it's still one of these things where the figurehead, or who have you, whatever company is providing the app services, is I don't want to start getting to like the data conversation, because that's another thing. Like, you know, yeah, I would say that, to answer your question, yes, I feel like the Web3 is going to usher in a new era of being able to actually cater even more specifically, actually have more stratified layers of customization in terms of service, product, in terms of people interacting with companies, and being able to understand, I don't know, if you want to call it pain points, because that's our I don't know. I don't know how to explain it, because I'm getting tongue twisted here, but I do think you're right. I think it's what is it? Libertarianism?
Techno libertarianism.
Yeah, I think techno libertarianism is going to be ushered in this next phase with Web3. I think that that's a good way to put it. It's going to be something that empowers people to a higher degree, and it's going to probably be founded upon, dare I say, cryptocurrency, because if you really want to start to mess with the definition of how money is used, or how it's accepted, and where it's accepted, and all that, if people start going into digital spaces, using them more, and there happens to be some agreed upon cryptocurrency that every business
Yeah,
uses in its own space,
yeah,
and people do the trading in that space, and if they want to come back into quote unquote real life, they switch it out for dollars at whatever exchange rate. Like, there's a lot, man. it,
yeah.
it really is a lot to cover. Like, there's a lot of ideas that start to, like,
Yeah, there's a lot here, and I think you and I are both really excited to kind of delve into these microcosms. And like I think to kind of round out this metaphor of like if Web 1.0 is this catalog that you subscribe to like Encyclopedia Britannica, it's like a single line stream, and Web 2.0 was this kind of or is this kind of portal for what's it's a portal for accessing the same sort of information, but now with a lot more interactivity. And I think that kind of what we've discussed is that Web3 is represents this ability to for us to become our own photographers of nature, to get paid by one another for like streaming, like video streaming sites set up by citizen scientists, citizen laboratories in all over the world, right? To get paid through transparent systems, and you know, and so like I think to kind of round this out also with a provocation is, is the average schmo ready or even willing to kind of take on this agency? The promise is grand, but does Web 2.0 suck enough so that Web 3 gets a critical mass?
Yeah, that is the question, isn't it? It's you know, I don't think it necessarily has to like that's. I feel like that's the problem. I feel like that's honestly the biggest problem when it comes. And again, this also links back to like you'll see it all over the internet, but you'll see that people talk about not Web3. I don't want to say Web3 because again, that's the overarching term. But like we'll talk about like NFTs or NFTs will be uh, a solution looking for a problem, and that's what they'll argue. And realistically, that's not that is not the way to look about. That's not the way to look forward, because realistically, again, it's a Henry Ford quote. It really is. It's when they asked him like, or they didn't ask him anything. I don't know what the interview was, and I didn't even know it's real because the internet loves to gaslight you. But if Henry Ford was asked, or he has stated, if I would have asked the people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't even invent the car. He invented the manufacturing.
People don't know what they want until they have it. They have the little rectangle in their hand that they can never let go of.
And you have apps. I think again that also goes into it. Hey, Nicole.
Hey,
Nicole Chiu is with us. How are you? So this is our guest for today's show, Nicole Chiu. Nicole Chiu. And I put on here designer of digital architecture, which is an oversimplification of what you do and who you are. So do you want to kind of tell our viewers how we met?
Yeah, so we were both studying for our architectural exams probably like half a year ago, and we both had the same 2 exams left, and we met on Discord, I guess as people meet these days. And I think you're like my first, real
boyfriend,
friend, I guess. I don't know.
Online, but age, sex, location.
Like everybody kind of comes and goes, and you really only talk about these exams, but I think you were the first person where we, talked a little bit beyond that, including this topic a little bit. So it was kind of cool. It was pretty organic. I think we even found that better connection just because of our shared former school. So
yeah, we didn't discover that until way later. Like we were like right at like about to finish. People don't understand that the architecture exams are like these agonizing 6 tests that typically take like somewhere between 2 years and 10 years for certain people. But we were like right finishing our last 2. And yeah, we met on Discord, just like study group Discord. And yeah, we didn't realize until later that we both went to Rhode Island School of Design.
Oh, right, because you're younger. That's right. What am I talking about? That's right. Right. Yeah.
But so here I'm going to round out your CV a little bit. Nicole Chiu is a RISD alum, as mentioned, and an architect and project manager with Arquitectura y Diseño in the West Coast, in LA or San Fran?
LA.
We since 2016 she's been developing affordable architecture housing projects in underserved areas of LA. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I think now, I've kind of been on and off of that, but currently I'm doing a little bit more of your typical bread and butter architect stuff. So like single family residential, we're doing a bar in Joshua Tree and a bunch of other little things. So it's a pretty new office, and we're just kind of figuring out what what are the things that we want to be working on. But I mean, it's pretty
Mhm.
exciting. We're a really lean team. We're 4 people with, some part-timers and some interns, but it's been great. I love the scale of the office, and yeah, it feels more right in a lot of ways.
That's awesome. And so how, I mean, I guess work aside, because I think a lot of us are exploring Web3 as like our side hustle. Um, we spent most of the last hour, Mike and I, talking about like obviously what Web 1.0, Web 2.0 is, and what the promise of Web 3.0, which is this kind of like exciting landscape of decentralized, like virtual space, trust, and transparency. And I know that you're kind of like self training in the Unreal Engine, which for a lot of people who don't understand, it's a 3D development tool that does animation and is often what feeds a virtual reality headset like the Oculus Meta Quest 2, whatever the hell the branding is of it. But so, how's that journey going for you?
Honestly, it's kind of taken a little pause. I'm not gonna lie. Just as like life just happens, and I think I was feeling really gung ho about it because I was like, oh, I'm just gonna learn this other tool. But I think what made me take a step back was I'm not actually sure what my intention is out of this tool. And I think that's something that happens a lot as we kind of get caught up in these terms or these softwares like, oh, I should learn how to code. Oh, I should learn what UX
Yeah,
UI is. And then
yeah,
you kind of are faced with it and you open up the app and that's the easy part. And the hard part is kind of figuring out, okay,
What
what am I trying to get from it? And I think that that process in itself is sort of that's like the hard work.
yeah,
I have heard and read from many a different forum and from many a different because I'm like you. I definitely have been interested in programming for such a long time, and and more than enough people tell me to start off with Python, for utility and for ease of use, and it's a high level language where you can actually kind of get to, I guess, places quicker in the sense that the way it's set up, at least language wise, is a little bit more intuitive than
yeah. The syntax makes
Objective
sense.
C, yeah, or anything like that. But yeah, everyone I've listened to or everyone that I've said anything is like, bro, if you want to learn how to do it, you got to have a goal or you got to have something that
Yeah,
you want to build and for whatever purposes, and then you just go along and try to figure out what you need to do to get to those specific steps, and now you learn programming, and it's like, oh,
yeah. You have to have
I
a
don't know
product
what
in
I want to
mind.
build.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I'm almost like maybe learning the actual software isn't what is right for me, Like that's kind of
yeah,
taking a step away from my ego and being like maybe I don't need to learn how to use this personally and I can kind of be like, okay, this is sort of what I want to get out of it. Who's somebody that already has spent the time and has those tools and can kind of just help like facilitate me getting there.
It's called
yeah.
delegating.
Sorry?
You need interns.
Delegation.
You need to delegate to interns.
Yeah,
Just
it's
like
called delegating.
yeah,
It's
I
like,
think I
yeah.
think that's also like that like shakeup of the pandemic, right? It's like, oh God, like I need to learn like 5 new skills by next year, otherwise I will not be hireable in any
Uh,
form or fashion. Yeah,
I feel like that was my first for programming. My first push into it is like, I'm going to be obsolete in 5 years.
yeah, yeah.
It's very true.
Yeah, so I have a few provocations, Nicole, while we have you. Just kind of these things that we're tossing around and like just I think maybe since you live in LA, you probably have like an even kind of broader or even kind of more specific ear on like what the kind of the techalati are. That's a terrible word. Well, what the tech Illuminati in the West Coast are kind of like humming and hawing about like Web3 and like how
The tech
the
masons.
yeah, exactly. Tech masons, right? Like, how do you see the philosophical notions of Web3, like the decentralization, reinforced peer-to-peer connections, as like affecting even just digital design?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I'm not really using every day just because,
Sure.
I'm in a more, I guess you could call it traditional office.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of architecture, I'm not really sure how that is going to be integrated in terms of a more business structure.
Right.
Um, Especially because we're dealing with a lot of things like liability and very real sort of issues that maybe transcend the digital space and kind of what, is happening there. But I mean, just in general, I can see kind of how everybody's sort of veering off to do their own thing, relying less on bigger companies. I mean, I think collaborating with individuals potentially would become a lot easier. You don't have to necessarily rely on an office and all of their resources. It's sort of like the idea is share, everything is kind of shared. And so I think that's exciting because, our field is so expensive to operate on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it would be really interesting to see how we can kind of share these costs to make it a little bit, like to kind of take down these mega giants like Autodesk and these software developers that they really monopolize our entire industry. And there isn't really a lot of competition against those types of softwares right now.
Right. Yeah, that's a really salient point.
You guys are gonna have to, because I'm a non-architecty, and I know a lot of what you guys just spoke about, or at least what Nicole spoke about. I'm just like, I don't know what monopoly scheme she's talking about.
So what Nicole's alluding to is she said Autodesk, which is this like the hegemon of architectural design production software. They do they made AutoCAD. And they bought Revit, and now they provide at a rich cost the most used architecture design softwares.
Okay, so it's like Adobe Photoshop subscription service for architecture.
Exactly. Yeah, precisely. And so I think the decentralization, like, and I already start to see it in things like Photoshop, where like you see all these kind of like freeware Photoshops. Like I've been using one.
Totally.
Yeah, I've been using one. Here,
GIMP?
I have it open. No, I used GIMP for a while, but PhotoP, like PEA.
Oh yes, I've heard of that too. Yes,
I've used that because it has all the same things. Yeah. So I think something like Autodesk is, I mean, maybe not Autodesk because they're so huge and they occupy everything, and they have like this cloud software that allows you to really quickly sync your design with all of the engineers that you work with and the client, and they provide virtual reality. They own it all. This video has not been brought to you by Autodesk.
Yeah, that was not supposed to be a free ad or anything.
Yeah.
Wait, okay, so my question though, Nicole, is so you're not okay, we were just talking about this earlier. You're not working under, like, as futuristic as this may sound, you're not under like a DAO, right? You're not like in a decentralized autonomous organization kind of deal. You're just that's what I want to get into. Is there anything blockchain / Web3 that you are using, or at least in this conversation, like how can you imagine it relieving the overlords owning everything that you guys use as tools?
How do you Web3 architecture?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
think that's like the ultimate. I don't know. I mean, the things that I could think of are just sort of like how we're actually going into contracts, and it's a little bit more technical, but going into contracts with, your owners or your contractors, all the players, all your consultants, things like that. It's kind of like the more advanced version of like a joint venture or something, right?
Right.
It sort of makes your connections with your clients and your consultants a little bit more transparent, and I think even more for like somebody who's not preparing these documents, right? It's more from kind of an office standpoint, making things more transparent, things like that. And I guess when you say it out loud, it kind of sounds boring, like there's not much there, but and then even, collaborating with other firms or other people, artists, whatever they are. I mean, all these things, like they can become a bit more transparent.
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier, how like the Web3 won't come with a bang, but with like a very necessary whisper, right? This kind of like developing a new trust system, that the contracts you have with your clients and your subcontractors can be way more transparent and way more incentivized and work better for the actual work that we are doing, which is exciting.
Right. Yeah.
In a nerdy way, it's very exciting.
Yeah, that's, and yeah, that what, like you said, we were just talking about this earlier. It's a lot. I feel like the reason why we started this and why you will be our test hamster, I guess, is to actually start to understand people's woes and why Web3 can be applicable in however many different forms that you've never thought they could be applicable. Using, in this case, hypothetically, I guess in this case, you would, a smart contract, or the question of transparency, or am I getting absolutely railed on this contract because someone's going to be getting whether more money or more power, more privilege over specific projects, or more rights, or what have you, or credit on a result, that or however it is that funding is distributed, and you have all these things that really you don't really start to question until for the most part, I feel like it always like ends up landing in like a creator kind of like power to the creators kind of deal, where a lot of people that end up working on something or in their own or write something or what have you, don't get or reap the benefits or the results of what they make. They're always being siphoned away by some sort of middleman or some sort of contract, or someone's got to get paid administratively. And that's I think that's what we're trying to get at here, at least trying to get a lot of different people to talk on the podcast, is like, what are your woes, what is it that can improve, and see where the imagination goes from there. Because realistically, I think that everyone has a pain point in that regard. I feel like there's a lot of middlemen that are starting to become, or questionably become, obsolete. And dare I say, that's something that I feel like crypto is starting to starting to dismantle the status quo in terms of like, be your own bank, or DeFi, or stuff like that, where it's like, why am I going to banks where they end up stealing all my money, or mortgages, and everything's being manipulated. And that's like how Bitcoin came to exist after 2008. And there's a lot of very sincere questions that are starting to come into play, not just philosophically, but like practically speaking.
Yeah.
Like we're talking about like stuff that's actually affecting real people in real time. And so yeah, that's what we want to get to specifically.
That actually kind of made me what you were just talking about right now kind of made me think of, maybe in another way I could see it folding itself in, is like this whole idea with credits and ownership in this industry. And we talk about mega banks and things like that, and this does not match that level or anything. But when it comes to process of design and ownership of certain parts, what usually ends up happening is the bigger known firm will kind of get all the credit for this whole thing. But in reality, it's, like dozens of people may have touched that project. And I think maybe that's one of the woes of our industry, is that all the people that have kind of sort of touched it or worked on it or something, like they sort of get lost in the weeds. And and that could be an interesting way of how like maybe smart contracts kind of come in, is like if we had this sort of very collaborative open source project and people come and go, there is a receipt of, oh, this person worked on this and this. And it does become a little bit more of a finessed, like everyone kind of owns this project because it couldn't have happened without all these people.
Right.
And I don't know, maybe
Yeah,
that's like really far-fetched, but it kind of was getting me to think what you were just saying. Like it sort of, I was like, huh. Because I guess that is sort of the whole idea of a smart contract, and that's what people want, is they do want to have that list of everyone and everything that's happened, basically just like a record.
Exactly. Like that's I mean, again, when it comes to like, I guess it's crazy. We can talk at lengths about everything, but realistically, like the problem is, or I mean, the topic always rolls right back into security and transparency of kind of each one being the same, one side of the same coin. It's you end up with this topic where you don't realize that you have pain points until you understand, again, like you just got to, again, you got to give it examples. You got to bring the people into the podcast, and and if you're disseminating the idea, they're like, oh yeah, what would be a good idea? It'd be this XYZ, and then you start to question. A lot of the times you start to question entire entities or entire industries. Like, I don't know, right now, for example, I'm just coming to my mind is like, let's say you work on a movie and you have a team of people that are working on a movie, and if they are, there's producers, there's a bunch of people that are working on this movie, and there's funding, and there's all these different moving parts. But then you understand, like, all right, well, almost with anything else, including like not just movies, but the beer industry is like this too, or any product in terms of getting it to the people. It's disseminated because of distribution. And so you have these distribution or distributors that take an enormous chunk of money because they are the centralized authority in distribution. And for something like a tangible asset like beer or whatever, like I understand, like I get it. But like for movies, it's like what do what does Paramount have to do with like, okay, like maybe the movie theater, that's one thing, but you still have streaming, you still have internet, like joint that you as the people have access to. And it then brings a whole nother question. And I was talking to my brother about this in an hour ago before you came on here, was like, this is where the whole digital assets and having ownership comes into play. Is like, if you go into a streaming service and you're paying for a monthly subscription of a streaming service, and you've done this for 5 years and you've paid $10 a month, and now you end up with a few $100s where, yeah, you have access to something, but you don't have anything to show for it. Like realistically, like this is where, like this movie idea with distribution is like, there's a marketplace where you made a movie and you set it out there and people pay for it, and it's a free market and they're willing to pay whatever. You set the standard, or whatever the smart contract is that this group of people set a price for in this marketplace, and you buy it on the other end of this sale, and you have a wallet, a digital wallet, that you now own this movie, or you now own the season of Friends, and you don't have to keep, you can literally part and parcel and customize whatever access, whatever it is, to all these digital assets that you now own, and they aren't under the proprietary service of some terms of service agreement between Amazon or Netflix or anyone else. You buy it, it's yours, it's set in the blockchain, you have an identifier for you, it's under your wallet. You can't sell, or you can't be taken away from you unless you yourself sell it to whoever else. And that is, I think, where a lot of people don't make the connection, is that it's cool to think about, because it's like, wow, that is interesting, but how is it going to work? And it's like, well, that is this, like, that is what the plumbing is being laid for. And the adoption and seeing it actually play out, or potentially playing out, or maybe not playing it out at all, because as Jack Dorsey said, we're already owned by everyone else, or all these venture capitalists already took their foothold in it. That is, I think, the just a stepping stone. Like, and that's just one example. How many others could we come up with? How many more can we scrounge up? And like, how many more can we actually, be like, oh, okay, this is actually, this is actually something that actually has utility, as opposed to everything's a scam. All of this is a scam.
Yeah, like, and I think the security and trust issue that we've been seeing with like security breaches and stuff makes this a more fertile field, right? Like the fact that we need more trust in certain systems, and like Web3 can provide it. Bitcoin has. I had a friend like 10 years ago in New York who would use crypto. I think he was using Bitcoin to buy illicit drugs online, like on the Silk Road, which is like an old school black market internet thing. And like, I mean, he wasn't like an addict. He was just a guy who wanted to get MDMA delivered to his house. And he
what?
Did. Yeah.
I don't know anything about that.
If it was you, you'd be wearing nicer T-shirts to your own podcast.
Full disclosure, I did at one time have like 40 Bitcoin or 50 Bitcoin in a wallet one time. Mm-hmm. Jesus Christ. Yeah, I did use it for drugs, and now it's all gone. But I just think about that sometimes. I'm just like, wow, like, holy shit, like that was like a lot of money now.
All right, since we had the pleasure of having Nicole Architect here with us, I did want to investigate another provocation of this. Nicole, you and I talked about digital real estate before, and kind of either we guffawed at it or we like like opened our mouths agape with like the possibilities of it. And here, let me just quickly navigate to this. So there's this I don't know what metaverse hosts this, but there's this place. I think the Row is like the real estate firm that sells or leases or rents, I don't know, digital virtual reality space to, I don't know, people who have a MetaQuest. I don't know who this would go to, who would like,
Oh my
like
God.
you'd have to spend enough time in virtual reality space to be like, okay, I want to actually go to somewhere that's like really gorgeous and nice, which I guess is fair. Or maybe you'd get a MetaQuest so you can access these spaces. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know about this specific project. I mean, it seems pretty purposefully elusive and exclusive and
Oh
like
yeah, totally.
invite only type of thing, which I mean is
It's the new
inevitable.
Raya. Yeah.
It is inevitable. But I do remember us talking about kind of just like why are things in the metaverse, and maybe this is an exception, but why are so many things that we're seeing like so similar to real life?
Yeah. Right.
And I was actually having a chat with a friend who is working at a company out here, that and they're kind of trying to develop this sort of full like experience where they're developing a wallet and also like a metaverse aspect and all these things to kind of round out the experience so that everything is in one place or from one source rather than
Hmm.
you have your MetaMask and then you're linking it to the other thing. And it's just like there's so many passwords and things to kind of remember and connect everything just sort of happens under one roof. But it was interesting because he was saying there is sort of this weird funnel or disconnect between designing something that's meant for the meta space and also making it work. Like the compression, there's like a technological aspect, like there's a just compression issue where you
Sure.
have to make sure that things are working properly before you can actually kind of fuck them up a little bit and make them a little bit more complicated or a little bit gravity defying or whatever it is. But yeah, I think we were talking about just this like frustration with why there isn't more exploration, and
Hmm.
like creativity. And it just seems like
Yeah.
people are using, materials that we would always see, and just it's always based off of reality, which just seems so counterintuitive
Hmm.
for something that's like, you know, meant to not be.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a tough question. That's a tough. I feel like that's a tough concept to wrap your head around in terms of like materials. I, I think it's like how do I say this? I think it's like the concept between, or it's the concept regarding like color spectrum. Like if you are only able to see in, for example, red to ultraviolet, or sorry, not red to violet, and you can only interpret your, it's limited by your hardware almost. Like you can only see these variations of colors, and everything beyond it is just electromagnetic spectrum that you is just invisible,
Yeah.
and when you start to ask yourself those questions of like, oh, like this could be so much more, it's like, yeah, it could be, but I think it can only be so much more in like the mechanics of the world, not so much like material. And like, you could make, yeah, whatever, you can make something, it's funny because I'm going to say gold, rainbow, whatever, but these are all things that we are already acquainted with. um, i think I think a good way to look at it is, like as anything else, it's just an extension of what we already have now. Like
Yeah.
this whole metaverse thing that we're looking at now is, and I hope I can manage to get someone from this company. But if you ever look up something called Protocol
Hmm.
Gemini is a really cool concept of essentially augmented reality world layered on top of, I guess, the concept of GPS. So like you not only have, locations of bit of places in bird's eye view, and like, and being able to go somewhere and put your little, drag your Google figure in there and like look around the street. But if you have, a bunch of people actually adding to this world, which is not not far fetched at all. You can go in this world, and like if you have all this input from all these different people from everywhere coming in, you don't only just have an address. You have, you can almost think about it like all this big data, all this information that is potentially lost to the fact that everything is centralized is now actually possible when you have everybody coming in, pitching in their own information as to this ramen place on this street has these types of menus. You walk up to it and you're like, oh, okay, and you have something that shows up as what's good here. The bathroom is like everything to like where the bathroom is, for example. You don't need to know or ask anyone else whether that's good for like social interactions. I don't know, maybe not, but it really does start to like actually materialize in those kinds of spaces. You're like, oh, okay, maybe it doesn't necessarily have to be completely virtual reality. Maybe augmented reality is that bridge where augmented is not necessarily, it's not virtual reality, but it is to some degree virtual reality in a sense. Like if everything, it's like Pokemon Go. Like you just add Pokemon onto the scene.
Yeah.
And like you're like, oh, okay, great, but it all is interacting with the real world on you. Like that is awesome. Like that is what I feel like we're now bridging into, and everyone thought about this. Everyone thought about this in 2000 or pre 1999. It's like, oh, what would be cool, like virtual reality, but like actually having a framework to work upon it is so much more believable. And then maybe we can figure out, online player one later on, or and like and incorporate that later. But like it's interesting because
it's like Jarvis. Like, what is Jarvis for us today?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's one of these things that like a lot of people don't. I'm not going to say that they don't believe it, but or they don't not believe it, but it's there. The potential's there, and and there's people much smarter than us doing it, and building the plumbing for it. And I'm gonna be ordering 10 of those. I'm gonna be like, dude, this is sweet. Like, why haven't we been doing? Oh, right, because again, we didn't lay the foundation for it yet. It's now coming to the thing, and yeah, like that's what we are trying to accomplish here. Is like we want to get people, hopefully get to the point where we have people coming in and being like, this is what we're doing and this is why we think it's cool. And it's just like, oh, okay, this is awesome.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I 100% agree. I think it's like we already have this infrastructure, which is buildings, which is physical space. Why recreate another world, which is buildings, physical space? Why aren't we just creating new layers, new filters to put on to our world to, for example, customize it? Like, let's say I wake up one day and I'm like, hey, I want to see the world in blue today. All blues. Mm-hmm. That's it. That's a filter. That's virtual reality. Like you said, smarter. It's like, hey, I want to get a little bit closer from just what a streetcar that has a camera on it is doing. I want to understand, what are people feeling? What are people thinking? It's like seeing live chats as you're somewhere, or just there's less of a disconnect of looking down at your phone, looking at a review, instead of just walking in and kind of having these things pop up into your visual space or whatever it is. And it's like, okay, maybe I want to eat here. Maybe I don't want to eat here.
Man, maybe we are going to have to start dusting off those Google glasses. Like we're like, oh man. Like
the Google goggles things?
Oh, yeah. 9000? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like look, Facebook is working with Ray-Ban to develop, like, that has like a camera in the middle to have like augmented reality experiences. And like there was a promise of location-based advertising that would just like send you a text message to your phone when you pass a Starbucks that gave you a coupon, and like that never materialized. So there's critical mass adoption issues with all of this like beautiful sounding tech, right?
I mean, it's hard, I think, now because people are actually starting to get concerned about things like privacy and geotagging and all these things. It's like, how do you actually now reverse that process a little bit and be like, okay, this has nothing to do with your data or whatever. This is just purely for this. I mean, it's so hard, like, right? I don't know nearly enough about it to like talk about it.
We have this Google Doc that I think I don't know if you looked over it, Jeff, but there's a line there for possible hosts, which is probably actually one of the more within our reach kind of deal. But there's two dudes there that basically worked. I think they were from Stanford, but they're professors that were like the key guys in organizing or I guess making the encryption of the internet. Like they're the ones that basically brought to the world the possibility, like they were going, like they dealt with like people like the CIA and the NSA about, whether you should be doing this or not because, security and other
Right.
countries and yada, yada, yada. And I think they would be a perfect guest here because I'm sure that they probably have something to say about everything that we're talking about. It's in what you just mentioned, Nicole, about, like where's the privacy combo going to go? Like, because everyone's definitely going to want a certain degree of privacy. I mean, especially in a world like that where, I mean, I don't know. I really don't know how much kind of privacy you would actually need when and if it's like a two-way road of like, all right, who's going to filter, for example, the information that's like relevant to a specific restaurant or what have you, a space in the augmented reality world. But, it does come into play, like the encryption of people's identities, and that entire topic of conversation is interesting. Like it's going to be possibly something that maybe we aren't thinking of. Maybe it's already solved by blockchain. I don't know, but that is interesting, and that's going to be hopefully someone in our guests. Hopefully, like I really want to try to bring those guys in because, or at least one of them, because they definitely have some serious insight into this. I don't know. Like I really don't know. That's actually a very interesting topic.
Well, so Nicole, now that you're a registered or soon to, did you take your California supplemental?
I have not.
It is. Is
I've
it
been kind of
scheduled?
dragging my feet on that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna take it in January, but
Nice.
it's okay. It's been nice living life for the past few months,
Getting back into it, right?
Yeah.
So as an architect or soon to be full fledged architect, how would you see yourself if somebody gave you the badge to like be an architect of Web3 digital realities within a Web3 ecosystem? Like, what are the guardrails that you would want to kind of like see set up in a kind of ecosystem like this to kind of ensure not just like, I guess, inhabitant quality, but I don't know. I feel like I'm conflating a lot of things. Like virtual reality and Web3 are not, they're not the same thing. But as we've seen with like gaming, they kind of inhabit a little bit the same space, or they come from the same space. So like, how would you build a Web3 that's good for yourself?
Yeah, that is a really good question. I mean, I think it's a little bit of what we were talking about earlier with kind of shared ownership and a little bit more transparency. I think as we're kind of semi nearing the phase of these like mega architects and super giants and things like that, I think people are kind of yearning for a little bit more ownership of their creativity and their kind of stance, because I do feel like our industry is quite jaded in
Mhm.
just sort of, how it's getting a little bit more owned by developers and people who just don't really give a shit about how things look or
Mhm.
how things feel.
Yeah.
Um, and then of course, on the other side you have a bunch of self-proclaimed architects, designers, whatever it is, like there's sort of this weird polarity of people that are kind of infiltrating this space. But it would be nice to sort of be able to better communicate as a community. I don't know. I think that something that's missing is that you either have your super, just very like, want to schmooze all the time, let's get the coolest project in the books and get it into a magazine, versus people are kind of doing things for themselves. And I think it would be cool to find a way to bridge that divide, where we're not just kind of, like climbing the ladder by ourselves, but it is a little bit more collaborative. I don't know if that really helps, but
I
Yeah.
I think I know where you're going. I there's a lot of questions that I, for example, ask myself in regards to at least something that's you know relevant to your guys' industry is like I always make this point. I always make this point because I think it's interesting where you have, for example, you have a world right now where it seems like, I mean, not seems like, there's definitely a more and more disparity of wealth inequality and all this stuff. But you also kind of weirdly have, strangely enough, higher higher expectations of living. You know, like you have, you know, the American dream 50 years ago, 60 years ago, whatever, included 3.5 people, 4 people, 5 people living in a 2, 3 bedroom house with maybe 1 or 2 bathrooms. You know, I've lived in Boulder for 15 years of my life, and a lot of those houses are still from the 50s and 60s. A lot of them are still 3 bedroom, 1 baths. And we're talking about a time where, you know, the supposed American dream was, it was lived very high and healthy, and very high and healthy in Boulder. And you have these, I asked myself these questions where I'm like, well, families are only getting smaller, but homes are getting fucking massive. And why is that? And, you know, you understand after going into your 30s and starting to look for homes for your first time, you're like, there's no point in making a small home or a starter home because developers want to make huge homes because the margins are there. And it's like, well, what about the needs of people? Like, what about the fact that you have all these other economic circumstances that don't benefit those people? And sure, like, there'll probably always be, or there more than likely will always be, more demand that outstrips the supply. And, you know, that won't be a problem for the developer or the contractor. And so, like, it's always best to just make the bigger home, and, you know, everyone else can go kick rocks. And like, that is, I think, an issue. Like, that is
Well,
an
hold
issue
on,
that,
hold on. You presume that all developers want to build big. Now, Nicole has worked for quite a while directly with developers of affordable housing. Like, does that resonate, Nicole?
no,
Like,
I mean,
They
no,
want
yeah,
to build big buildings, but they don't want to
Mhm.
build big units. Do you know what I mean? They're
right,
capitalizing. I mean, they're
of
Mhm.
course.
capitalizing on that land. And, you know, when it comes to affordable housing, I mean, honestly, this is like a whole other conversation, but it isn't, yeah, they never make it easy, and they never make it cheap. I mean, this is so irrelevant to this topic, but like one of those units, it's going to cost public and private money combined, like, you know, $900,000 a unit. And we're talking about a maybe 300 to 400 square foot on a good day.
Oof. Wow.
And it's crazy. I mean, it doesn't really make sense. And so anyway, that's like a whole other
That's a
like,
rabbit hole.
yeah, a whole other rabbit hole. But yeah, I mean, it's just big buildings, but cut up into the smallest little shoebox, you know?
Yeah, that's, I mean, but again, it's all about, this is what we're talking about. It's about maximize, like, oh man, it's, I really hope, like, I really hope that we, and hopefully, I don't know, you know, because this is being hopeful, but I really hope Web3 again, and we were talking about this earlier, I really hope that it ushers in an era of, like, of really pushing back on this whole, like, growth and profit at all costs.
Yeah.
Because realistically, like, you know, what does it matter if you have growth and profit at all costs if at some point somewhere in the system or the society or the economy something's going to snap and all your gains are going to go to shit? And, you know, sure, like, it'll end up in the hands of a few, more than likely, more than often it does, but it's not a sustainable model. Like, you just, that's, you know, that's the whole problem that comes into play whenever it is that, you know, we talk about decentralization, not just of the digital space, but money, of people's power, people's say in things. You know, like, there has to be a more even distribution of not just, you know, power, but money and say. Because, you know, and, you know, it's, I mean, we come from a very Cuban family, so, you know, my parents are going to be like, "You're a communist," but that's not what I'm trying to say. You know, that's not what I'm trying to say at all. Like, what I'm trying to say is that you
Our
don't.
parents accuse us of communism like at the drop of a hat. Like, we're like you tip more than 15% on a bill. You're like, what are you, a communist? Like
Dude,
hold on,
my
slow your
my
roll.
mother my mother has caught me. We go to this restaurant all the time, and there's this Cuban kid who is, you know, like, Raptor from Cuba guy. And like, and you know, he's like, all right, he's like one shade away from what my parents went through in hardship to getting this country. And he's a server at this restaurant. And whenever they tell me to, you know, put the tip on the bill, you know, they tell me X amount, 15 or 20%. And I'm like, I'm going to give them $5 more. And they're like, what? And it's like, whoa. And I'm just like, and I'm like, if it's not for him, then who are you going to give this money to?
Yeah.
It's like,
I mean, we come from a kind of like Milton Friedman, what is it? The free market will fix all the woes. And obviously, that I think it's coming to a reckoning, right? Or it already has come to a reckoning, and being from Florida or from Cuban parents, it like hasn't quite hit us yet. But there are economies that exist and that thrive on the abandonment of that notion, right? They're local economies. You know, what's that service that brings you like ugly fruit? There's a bunch of those. Yeah. But
perfect produce, something like that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I would like to thank, from the bottom of my heart, Nicole Chiu, for lending your very valuable time for this weird little starting thing that we're doing. I want you to get back to so you just, I think last we spoke, you were joining kind of the team with a former employer or a current employer, like a breakout outfit, right? And that's basically what you're doing now, right?
That's where I am now. Yeah, it's just been a couple of months, so it's still pretty fresh, but you know, we're trekking along. I feel like we've got an exciting year coming up. I mean, at this point in time, it's very much like grassroots, you know, friend of a friend or a neighbor of a previous client or something. And so it's actually, it feels quite organic, which is honestly really awesome. It's a little bit of hunting, but not too much.
I feel like the smaller the firm is, and this probably goes for not just architecture, the smaller the firm is, the more each person actually has to do business development, biz dev, right? They have to like go out and like go hunt.
Yeah, there's definitely an openness to kind of, you know, bring in projects. Like each person definitely has that ability, which is really awesome as long as we have the capacity, you know. I think everything at this point is kind of welcome, and we're sort of figuring out where we want to be, but we'll always have a house. It's like the perfect scale, you know.
It's exciting.
Everything easy and everything difficult at the same time.
Well, why is it called arquitectura y diseño? Is it Hispanic?
No, that's a really, I'll ask tomorrow. I have no idea. But my boss is from Mexico City, so, you know, maybe there's a little bit of that.
Yeah.
And, you know, so. Keep it straightforward, right? What are you getting? Yeah. Architecture and design, sure.
Fair enough. Nicole, thanks again. You are welcome on the Web3way whenever. Get on that Python. Give us something to look forward to.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, maybe I can dig up some old Python stuff from college, but honestly, I haven't run any of those in a long time.
I need to get into Python. I need to get my Python groove again. I went through the Code Academy nursery, and I'm like, yeah, I'll just stop here on like my 7th chapter in, and then I don't know what I did after that. That's where I left it. I was like, I need to go back to it. It's been months. Jeez.
Here's to self-development and the never-ending kind of demand for it.
All right. By next time, we'll all have a new software under our belts.
And we'll have a beautiful house in the realm, hopefully, in the digital metasphere.
Yeah, I'm thinking like, you know, 8-bit. It'll be pretty basic.
Like Super Mario Brothers 2, just like
yeah.
mirror.